Kip Cranna is the Dramaturg Emeritus of the San Francisco Opera, where he served on the staff for over 40 years, 30 of them as Director of Music Administration. He has managed the commission or recommission of more than 20 new operas. In 2008, he was awarded the San Francisco Opera Medal, the company's highest honor. And in 2012, he received the Bernard Osher Cultural Award for distinguished efforts to bring excellence to a cultural institution. He holds a BA in music from the University of North Dakota and a PhD in musicology from Stanford University. So, without further ado, I welcome Kip Cranna.
Thank you. I've got my own.
You got your own.
Yeah, I'm mic'd up. Thank you, Jeffrey. It's great to be back for another one of these series in what we're calling Who's Afraid of Opera? I'm going to say right now, so you have time to move, you're going to want to be closer to the screens than you are, because I'm going to be showing tons of video, but you can judge for yourself, but I'm guaranteeing after the first video or two, some of you further back, feel free to move down. There's lots of space closer, and you'll enjoy it, I can guarantee more, if you can see the screens up close. I have done lots of emceeing for outdoor concerts, but I've never given an opera lecture outdoors before. And this is kind of fun. And thank you for braving the desert windstorm to come out. I guess it's not as bad as we thought it might be. Your hat might get blown off at some point during the afternoon, but probably nothing worse than that. I'm thrilled to have a set. When I walked out here, I thought it was the Barber of Seville, but then I thought, well, no, I don't think that tiki bar setup really works for the Barber of Seville. It's Mamma Mia, as you probably know, if you're talking about coming attractions. So our topic today, this is part of a 3-lecture series that I'm doing this winter on Who's Afraid of Opera, and if you were around last month, I talked about heroic women in opera who don't die, women who survive and triumph. And today, our topic is Let Freedom Sing, operas about liberation. And I pulled out that famous Delacroix painting there of liberty leading the people. So I'm pulling out opera excerpts from down through the ages today that illustrate this whole idea about freedom, aspiration for freedom and liberty in opera, sometimes the struggle for it, sometimes the complaint about the lack of it, and all of that sort of thing. When we talk about freedom, of course, it can be a complicated topic. Freedom for whom to do what? Is it freedom for your neighbor to play loud music at 2 a.m.? Maybe not. Freedom for you to drive down the street at 120 miles an hour? Maybe not. Freedom for you to have 2,000 snakes in your basement? Well, maybe not. There are limitations on this, and the struggle to obtain freedom is always part of the conflict that opera enjoys exploiting. Right now, of course, we have all these arguments about freedom. Should I be free to wear a mask on an airplane or not? You know, all these questions that really plague us. And is it freedom for a group, that is a nation, a people, for a racial or sexual minority? We're going to talk about some of that this afternoon. Or is it freedom for an individual person to enjoy their life and do what they want? Freedom from what? Freedom from foreign oppressors is a very typical topic in opera. We'll have some examples of that today. So that's liberty on a political level. And then we have freedom from harsh authority, that's personal liberty, often from oppressors like parents. And then we have discrimination and inequality, that's a civil liberty, and that has become much more of a topic in recent opera, particularly in America. It was not so much an emphasis in earlier periods. So, well, let's plunge right in and explore all these various iterations of freedom, expressions of freedom in opera. I'm going to start with Don Giovanni, and this is an interesting scene because it shows what happens when singers are singing about something they don't actually believe. You probably know the situation here. In this scene, Don Giovanni's throwing a party, and he's all for liberty for himself, which is basically freedom to have all the women he wants. And the 3 maskers have come to basically unmask him. They're barging into the party in disguise to try to catch him in the act of being licentious. So when they're singing about liberty, some of them don't actually mean it. Here is the maskers scene from Don Giovanni. Venite pur avanti, vezzose maschere.
tutti quanti, viva la libertà! Siamo grandi segni di generosità, è aperto a tutti. Siamo tutti quanti segni di generosità. Viva la libertà! Viva la libertà!
How is that volume level? I can't really tell. Was that loud enough? Okay, thank you. Stephen's out there monitoring the volume. All right, so this is wonderful music of Mozart, of course, celebrating liberty, viva la libertà, but some of the people singing it don't actually mean it. Let's go on to The Marriage of Figaro, another Mozart opera, one of my favorites, based on a play by Pierre Caron de Beaumarchais. We usually call him Beaumarchais. And then that was a French play turned into an Italian libretto, that is to say a script for the opera, by Lorenzo da Ponte, and then set to music gloriously by Mozart. And there's a wonderful scene in the play that expresses the aspiration for liberty from oppressive nobles. This is a famous scene where Figaro, who is going to be marrying Susanna, but he knows that their boss, the Count, is trying to get Susanna in the sack, is trying to use his privilege as a nobleman to make that happen. In this speech, Figaro denounces hereditary privilege and the rights of nobles to have all the privilege that they do. Here is this very short, rather inflammatory speech from The Marriage of Figaro, the play.
Non, monsieur le comte, vous ne l'aurez pas. Vous ne l'aurez pas. Parce que vous êtes un grand seigneur. Vous vous croyez un grand génie? Noblesse, fortune, un rang, des places, tout cela rend si fier. Qu'avez-vous fait pourtant de bien? Vous vous êtes donné la peine de naître, et rien de plus. Du reste, homme assez ordinaire. Tandis que moi, morbleu, perdu dans la foule obscure, il m'a fallu déployer plus de science et de calcul pour subsister seulement, qu'on en a mis depuis 100 ans à gouverner toutes les Espagnes. Et vous voulez jouter?
So, them's fighting words from this play from before the French Revolution, where an ordinary man is challenging the rights of the nobility to have their positions of power and authority. Well, that wouldn't go in the opera in Vienna. The Emperor Joseph II forbid the play, but he did allow the opera. You can get away with singing things sometimes that you can't get away with just speaking out loud. But it had to be toned down, and this is the librettist Lorenzo da Ponte's version of this speech, and it's all put in the metaphor of teaching how to dance. So Figaro saying, if you want to dance, my dear little Count, I'll play the tune for you on my guitar. If you want to attend my school, I'll teach you a few steps. I'll know how, but with caution. And he goes on to talk about the scheming. Figaro's a famous schemer in all of the iterations about that character in various plays and operas. So here is the version of this speech. This very inflammatory political speech in French wouldn't work. So we have a metaphor now challenging the Count's authority by the idea of teaching him to dance and basically calling the tune. Here's Gerald Finley with the first part of this aria.
Se vuol ballare, signor Contino, se vuol ballare, signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò. Se vuol venire nella mia scuola, la capirola le insegnerò. Se vuol venire nella insegnerò sì, insegnerò sì, insegnerò.
The rest of the aria is sung by another singer, Luca Pizzaroni.
L'arte schermendo, l'arte adopprando, dico puntendo, di là scherzando, tutte le macchine rovescerò. L'arte schermendo, l'arte adopprando, dico puntendo, di là scherzando, tutte le macchine rovescerò, tutte le macchine rovescerò, tutte le macchine rovescerò. Ballare, signor continuo, se vuol ballare, signor continuo, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò.
So sometimes, particularly back in the 18th century, expressions of longing for freedom from the oppression of the higher classes, the noble classes, have to be sort of couched in metaphoric language. If there is a famous opera about liberation, it's Beethoven's Fidelio, which comes, of course, after the French Revolution. And it's a story about a woman named Leonora who disguises herself as a boy named Fidelio to get a job in the prison where her husband, Florestan, is unjustly being kept as a political prisoner and is being slowly starved to death. And Leonora does rescue him. This is from a genre known as the rescue opera. It's very popular around this time. One of the most moving moments in it is the so-called prisoner's chorus. Fidelio, that is Leonora in disguise, manages to persuade the jailer to let the prisoners out of their dungeon into the courtyard for just a few moments so they can enjoy the fresh air and the sunlight. And their expression of joy at just this moment out in the freedom of the air is very touching. This is from San Francisco Opera's recent performance just this past fall, set in a modern sort of detention center. Here's a little bit of the prisoner's chorus. I do a lot of opera lecturing, and I often show videos that feature modern dress productions. It's very much the thing in opera today. But I know that audiences tend to hate it. So let's watch a little bit of the Prisoner's Chorus in a traditional production. This is from the Vienna State Opera with Leonard Bernstein conducting. This is an old video, so not quite such high quality definition. But here's a little bit more of the Prisoner's Chorus. see Leonora there, Gundula Janowitz in this production, looking around to see if her husband Florestan is amongst these prisoners, but of course he's not. He's being kept in solitary. We end with a wonderfully ecstatic, happy ending for Fidelio after Leonora successfully rescues her husband just at the moment when he's about to be executed. And what the chorus is singing about here is really how great it is to have a faithful, heroic wife. But the music is telling us much more than that. It's telling us about the exhilaration of freedom and liberation. So here's the very ending of Fidelio. Now, if you're thinking, gee, that sounds a lot like the Ode to Joy and then Beethoven Ninth Symphony. Well, yes, it does, but this comes several years earlier, and it is a similar expression of the ecstasy of liberation and freedom. You might think, well, it's pretty hard to top that in terms of operas about liberation, but I've got one that might, and we'll save that for the end. By the way, I'll stop in a few minutes for questions about halfway through. If you have any questions for me, you can try to shout them out and see if I can hear them over the wind, and I'll try to answer them. I want to talk about Rossini's Italian Girl in Algiers, which is a comedy, but is about a brave woman, Isabella rather, who goes to Algiers to rescue her beloved Leonora, who's captive there amongst a bunch of other Italians who were shipwrecked, and they're captive of a bey, that's B-E-Y, which was like a provincial governor in the Ottoman Empire. Anyway, at the end of the opera, she summons everyone to buck up their courage and be brave, and they're going to break away. They're going to make their escape. So here is the wonderful Marilyn Horne as Isabella, telling everybody to think of your country as an appeal to Italian patriotism and liberty. Here we go. In one of her famous two-octave leaps there at the end. All right, going on to Bellini's I Puritani. This is an opera, another bel canto opera, like The Italian Girl in Algiers, about the conflict between Puritans and Catholics in 17th century England. And Dmitri Chvorstovsky is the baritone here, the late, great Russian baritone who died way too young of brain cancer. The baritone never gets the girl, of course, and he's not going to get the girl. And the bass, Samuel Ramey, tells him that, forget about the girl, and let's join with me, and we'll fight for patriotism and for freedom. So this is a real rootin' rousing number called Suoni la Tromba, that is to say, let the trumpet sound. Dmitri Chvorstovsky and Sam Ramey. This is kind of halfway through. So one of the things that this illustrates is that in many operatic expressions of the desire for freedom and liberty, it comes at the expense of someone else's, and that's what's being sung here. Liberty for the Puritans is going to mean downfall for the Catholics, and that tends to be this zero-sum game that very often is part of the action in operas about freedom and liberation. Here's another pretty good example, Verdi's Nabucco, which is his first success, the thing that really put him on the map as a composer from 1847. It is very, very loosely based on the story of Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, and the Babylonians who took the people of Israel captive. And this is an expression of that from Psalm 137 in the King James Version. You probably know this text. This is the people of Israel in captivity bemoaning their fate. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof, for there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? This is very beautifully put to music by Verdi in this chorus, Va pensiero, which means go my thoughts on wings of gold back to the homeland. This has become a sort of a national anthem for Italians, expression of a longing for freedom. Here's a little bit of Va pensiero. This is a performance from the Metropolitan Opera. So, as we saw in a couple of earlier examples, expressions about freedom, longing for freedom, are often wrapped up with patriotism and love of homeland. But along comes the prophet Zechariah in this opera, who says, oh, people, stop complaining. Let's pull ourselves together here. We're going to rise up and defeat the Babylonians, and there'll be not one stone left upon another. Quotation from the Bible. So here's Samuel Ramey rousing the people of Israel and giving them hope at the expense of the Babylonians, of course. So freedom for one group often means sort of bad luck for the others, for another group. In this opera, unlike in real history, Nebuchadnezzar repents and sets the Israelites free, but a little liberty taken in the history in the world of opera. Let's go on to Macbeth, another Verdi opera that has the theme of trying to throw off oppression. You know the story of Macbeth, I'm sure. I won't insult your intelligence by trying to tell you anything, but in this part of the opera, Macbeth, of course, is ruthlessly putting down any oppression, aided by his wife, of course. And here we have the Scottish people singing Patria, oppressa, the oppressed people of the country. And we'll see toward the end of this image of Macduff, whose whole family has been murdered by Macbeth, and we see them sort of in a glass box. Very unusual production from Switzerland. Anyway, here's Patria, oppressa from Verdi's Macbeth. In Italy, but Verdi's audiences would have been able to relate to the idea of a country oppressed because they were all under the thumb of foreign domination at that point. But there's a happy ending for this one too, not for Macbeth, of course, Lady Macbeth, but for the Scottish people. And here they are rejoicing about their newfound freedom with Luis Lima here as Macduff and Miroslav Kristoff as Malcolm, who's the new king. Here's the ending of Macbeth. Production in San Francisco, this production from Zurich, and don't ask me what those books that they were waving around, like the little red books from Up German Mouse, something like that. I asked the assistant stage director who'd worked on this production, hey, what was that all about? And he said, I can't remember. At the end there, we see the boy picking up the sword, and from that, I think that's Banquo's son. If you recall the story, Banquo was killed, but the witches predict that his progeny will be kings of Scotland. And Shakespeare wrote the play during the time of James I of England, who believed himself descended from Banquo. All right, let's go on to a little more Verdi. Now on a personal level, this is Violetta in La Traviata, singing Sempre Libera, I must always be free. In this case, free of men. She just wants to live her life and enjoy it. This is Renee Fleming. She doesn't remain forever free. She falls deeply in love. All right, let's go on to Carmen. This is the end of Act 2, where we have a different kind of freedom being expressed. This is Carmen getting her boyfriend to join her smuggler friends, her gypsy smuggler friends, to go off into the mountains and be free of oppressive society, to just be out in the open air on your own. This is the end of Act 2 of Carmen, La Liberté. Most intoxicating thing, freedom. All right, we're going to skip ahead now into the 20th century for Virgil Thomson's opera, The Mother of Us All, based on a libretto by Gertrude Stein of Pigeons on the Grass, alas, fame. Some of her poetry doesn't quite seem to make sense. She's more interested in the sounds of the words and the combination of the words and so forth, rather than the actual meaning. And that worked well for Virgil Thomson, who liked the idea of the freedom that he had to write what he wanted. This is an opera about Susan B. Anthony, of course, the famous fighter for women's suffrage, and she tragically didn't live to see it. She died in 1906, and the 19th Amendment, I think, went into effect in 1920, giving women the right to vote all across the country, and there were some states where they had it by that time, but she never saw her dream realized. This is a production from Texas where we see her now. She's a statue in a museum that features famous women. And she's looking back on her life and all that she fought for, not realizing that it hadn't been, that it would soon be accomplished, rather, shortly after the end of her lifetime. So here's a little bit of the end of The Mother of Us All. As you could hear, Virgil Thomson was using simple American hymn tunes there as part of his music. He was often mentioned in the same breath with Aaron Copland. He was rather jealous, I think, of Copland's greater fame, but they were certainly part of that same generation. All right, we're going on to gay liberation now, the struggle for freedom for LGBTQ people. There are lots of operas about this topic nowadays, but this one goes back to the early 90s about Harvey Milk, who, of course, the famous supervisor of San Francisco who was murdered along with Mayor George Moscone. It is wrongly stated that Harvey Milk was the first openly gay elected official in America. That's not true. The first openly gay elected official in America was a woman named Kathy Kovalenko, who was elected to the Ann Arbor City Council before Harvey Milk's election. He was the first such person in California and in a major city. And here is Harvey Milk's aria from the opera by Stuart Wallace with a libretto by Michael Corey. So that kind of tells the whole story of Harvey Milk's career. Here he is in his youth, embracing both his Jewish and gay identities. He resolves to fight for his rights. This is from an audio recording, but I've got the text put in there. So this is a bit of Harvey Milk's aria.
Just one person, but I have I remember who I remember my name, my people.
I wish I had time for all of that, but just a little sample of Harvey Milk. The struggle for racial equality, of course, is a big topic nowadays, and there are lots of operas on that one. I'm going to play a little bit of Philip Glass's opera Appomattox, which was a San Francisco Opera commission back in 2007. Musically, it's very different from some of Philip's earlier operas, which are very minimalist, that is to say, with lots of repeated patterns, and so forth. Einstein on the Beach is typical of that, Satyagraha, Akhenaten, and so forth. This is a little more in a style of narrative without quite so much repetition. And it tells, of course, the story of 1865's end of the Civil War and the meeting at Appomattox Courthouse where the peace treaty was signed with General Grant and General Lee. But in the clip we're going to show you, it also advances 100 years to 1865 when a man named Jimmy Lee Jackson, a black activist for civil rights, was murdered by Alabama state troopers. And so we have this sort of 100-year gap trying to show that the struggle continues for racial equality and justice. Here are some excerpts from Appomattox.
God with the voice of triumph, for the Lord most high is terrible. He is the great King over all the earth. He shall subdue the people under us, and the nations under our feet. He will choose our inheritance for us, the excellence of Joseph.
few little tidbits there from Appomattox. We have the expression of the struggle for racial equality also in John Adams' Girls of the Golden West from 2017. Not Puccini's Girl of the Golden West, but Girls in this case. It's the story of various women in the California gold rush. But it also has a scene depicting the 4th of July celebration. There's a quote from this famous speech of Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist fighter. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. So in this opera, these words are given to one of the characters, and it's delivered on this famous stump. Some of you may have seen it. You can visit it up there in Calaveras Big Trees State Park near the town of Arnold in the gold country, Angels Camp, that area. So it was this gigantic, magnificent tree that they decided to cut down just because they could. And they would have dances on the stump. And so Act 2 of the opera takes place on this stump, a 4th of July celebration. And part of it is this speech with the words of Frederick Douglass. Here is Devone Tynes as the singer.
What is this celebration to me? What is this celebration to me? The 4th of July is yours, not mine. Above your national tumultuous joy, I hear only the mourning of those whose chains heavy and grievous yesterday are rendered on this day. Oh, the more intolerable, oh, the more intolerable, oh, the more intolerable. By the jubilee shouts that reach them.
So we've seen various expressions about the desire for liberty and freedom on all kinds of levels, political, personal, social, racial, and so forth. I said that there was something I thought I might play for you that would top Fidelio even, and so we're going back to the 19th century here to Rossini's William Tell, his French grand opera that was the end of his career. And I'm sure you know his story. William Tell was the Swiss patriot and the Austrian overlords. Because he refused to bow down to the overlord's hat, he was required to shoot an arrow, or rather shoot an apple off the top of his young son's head, and he did so, and ultimately, in the opera, he sparks rebellion, and they overthrow their Austrian overlords, and they have a celebration of freedom. This is the end of Rossini's William Tell. hard to top that. So there you have it. Let Freedom Sing. Opera's about liberation. I hope you'll come back in about a month's time when I'll be here to talk about betting on operetta. Spotlight Ein Lot Opera. That'll be on Tuesday, March 8th, and the following night there'll be a concert of operetta selections. Thank you very much for listening, braving the wind. It was a pleasure talking to you.